When we look at under-resourced communities, they are very often living in what we call the tyranny of today. They're in survival mode. We have to remember that our job isn't to judge them, our job is to serve them. The only way to serve them is to establish a connection and a relationship.
Hey everyone, this is Matt Keeman, your host of Nonprofit on the Rocks and co-founder of Envision Consulting, which just opened up an office in Lexington, Kentucky, and we are a national nonprofit consulting firm doing strategy work, merger work, executive recruiting work with nonprofits. And with us, as always, is Ashley Watterson, our producer. And Ashley, I'm still working off that bourbon drunk night that I just had in Lexington on my way back to LA.
That must have been some night. Or is this just age? Is this just like it takes 4 days for your kidneys to process like one bourbon?
First of all, you're fired. And second of all, I'm only 24. My body can process bourbon all day long and all night long. There's no stopping me. And that's exactly what he said.
So it really was just an epic night.
It was an epic week. I'm so proud of this company. I mean, we're in Lexington, Kentucky. Never, ever did Allison and I think that we would open up an office in Lexington, which is so cool. So yeah, that's where I was. And dear listener, if you are paying any attention to us, I just want everybody to know, as you've been working with us and listening to us and being part of this for the last 4 years, how proud I am of the growth of this company. So I don't know, Ashley, if it has to do with this podcast. Would we think that you're doing a good job and helping us grow? What do we think?
I mean, I think one can only draw the lines, you know? It's like envision growing, podcast has been launched, it's happening concurrently. So I don't know. I feel like for sure I could claim some responsibility.
So interesting. Very interesting that you would say that. Do you want to tell our listener where it is that your family is from?
Well, it's not Lexington, Kentucky, but it is Kansas City, Missouri. Matter of fact.
And do you want to tell our listener just how many engagements that we have landed in Kansas City, Missouri?
I blame my family on that. I've been trying and trying to get them to spread the word.
I want to know if your family is still listening to our show, because as you know, we've talked about our families listening to this show, and I feel like they've dropped off somewhere along the way. Does your mom still listen?
I know she gets the notifications when the podcast drops, but I think like maybe we've breached the statute of limitations on like familial responsibility to show their support. Maybe your family and my family, they just feel like, well, we supported that for a while, but you know.
I think it was 2 shows ago, 3 shows ago in our intro, I said, hey, if my sister is actually listening to this show, she'll text me. Well, she did.
Lauren, we're so proud of you. Yay! She's back on the Hanukkah list.
She's back on the Hanukkah list. You may be off until we get like that search in Kansas City, but like, yes, she is back on. So what else do we want to share with our listener before we let them listen to my friend and just amazing human, Cid?
Well, I just want to make sure you didn't melt during the like 8,000-degree weather we were having here in September in Southern California.
That's right. It was like 110 degrees for like 10 days straight. It was horrendous. You know that I have an aversion to the sun. I'm allergic to the sun. You know this, correct?
I do know this.
And so I have a sunbrella. And I got to tell you something, even if everybody makes fun of me carrying an umbrella, and I do, I'll tell you what, when it was 110 degrees outside, no one was making fun of me. They were all like, how do we fit in there with you?
This is how your skin stays so gorgeous, first of all.
Mm.
And second of all, is sunbrella just like a more manly way of saying parasol?
It is, if you will, a parasol.
You and all your over 65-year-old ladies walking around with your parasols?
Listen, if you spend as much money as I do in Botox and filler and laser and soon to be a neck lift, like, I don't want any of that sun hitting that face.
Well, Matt, there is no doubt that you, my friend, do not have a face for radio. Okay. Am I back on the Hanukkah list now?
I think maybe you should explain to our listener that that actually is a compliment.
Yes, I'm sorry, listener. Back in the day when I did actually work for radio, there's a running joke about people who have a face for radio. Like in radio, you don't need to be pretty, you just need to have a nice voice.
Mm.
Matt is one of those rare birds that has both the voice for radio and the face for film and television, really.
Back on that Hanukkah list. Who cares about that client in Kansas City? Back on.
Excellent.
All right, on that note, let's let our listener listen to my friend Cid. He is so spectacular. I cannot wait for people to learn about him, learn about his organization, and just listen to how much you want to like be a better human after listening to Cid. So, anything we want to leave before we let our listener listen to Cid?
If you want to find out more about this episode with Dr. Cid Pinedo of the Mexican American Opportunity Foundation, you can find us at envisionnonprofit.com and streaming on YouTube.
Hello, my very good friend Cid. How you doing tonight?
I am doing wonderful. How are you, brother?
I'm so happy to do this. You know, it's taken me 4 years to build up my confidence to interview you. Like, that's how much you mean to me. 4 years for me to get here. So,
My God. No pressure.
no pressure. None at all. None at all. Well, before we start, this is a drinking show. It is a happy hour show. So, what are you imbibing on this evening?
I am sipping on a extra añejo tequila,
Mm.
and I am then kind of, I guess, chasing or sipping that with a Modelo cerveza.
Nice. I love that so much. I want everybody to know that when I came to your office, I'm blown away by how much amazing booze you have in there. So if anybody's listening and they want to go visit Cid at his office, he's got more booze than I think you know what to do with Cid. So like, I'm excited. I'm drinking crappy bourbon. My staff bought really crappy bourbon and I'm at the office. So to crappy bourbon and to your really good tequila. Cheers, my friend.
Salud.
All right. So you're one of my favorite people out there in the nonprofit space. I adore you. And as we start, I would love it if maybe you shared a little bit about your story as to how in the world and why in the world you got into nonprofit.
You know, brother, I think it's a few things. I was born in East LA. I was raised in El Monte in the San Gabriel Valley, under-resourced community and family and all that kind of stuff, right? For some reason, though, I was kind of thinking about being a priest when I was a kid.
Mhm.
And so I went to Catholic school and then went to college seminary as well. And so the reason that's all kind of relevant to the question is when I ended up deciding not to become a priest, I was then kind of wondering, so what the heck am I supposed to do now? Right. And my bachelor's is in philosophy with a minor in psychology. It always just felt right and good helping people.
Mhm.
And that's always just when maybe feeling down and wondering and having doubt, helping someone else just kind of always gave me some fuel and some direction. And so, honest to God, true story. I was driving home late one night, which probably means early in the morning from God knows where. And I was listening to the radio, and there used to be Catholic radio on the station I used to listen to in Southern California. So I'm listening to it, and the DJ is sharing this story about how we've all heard the story of St. Peter and the pearly gates. And when we pass away, we're in front of St. Peter. And the way the story goes is that St. Peter starts to ask you a bunch of questions, and the answer to those questions determine whether the gates of heaven are open, they say. And the questions are, did you clothe the naked, give drink to the thirsty, feed the hungry, comfort the sorrowful? It's what we call the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. And I remember hearing that and just thinking, oh my gosh, that's a good reminder of what I'm supposed to be doing. And then the DJ says, and so you answer the questions and you answer them correctly, and the gates open and you think you're in heaven. And he says, oh no, man. He goes, you're just in the front yard. And I thought, whoa. And he says, now envision this building, this structure, as big or as small, as simple or as elaborate and fancy as you need it to be to draw you toward it. He says, and now you're at the front door and you knock on the door. And he said, this time God answers, and God's going to ask one question, and the answer to that question determines whether the gates of heaven are open to you. And the question was, did you have an impact on anyone's soul? And Matt, I heard that and I thought, okay, that's what I want to do. And ever since then, every night, my prayer is, okay, God, I hope you use me today to impact a soul, and I don't need to know. Because in not knowing, then I get up the next day wanting to do that again. So every morning, as simple as that, okay, God, use me today to impact a soul, and I don't need to know. And
You
that became my guiding light.
see, this is what now every single listener out there is like, Jesus Christ, Cid, I am nowhere near as good of a person as you. Okay, so as a Jew, I have a lot of questions for you about this, but like my first question is, as a priest, are you able to drink and swear as much as I know that you do?
Well, as a priest, you have to remember they are both human and divine.
Hmm.
Second, our Lord's first miracle was converting water into wine. And Jesus, as divine as he was also human. So I could say that I am just trying to emulate our Lord. As a Catholic, you can find a way to justify everything you do.
Yeah, right. And then the other thing that you were saying that I was thinking about was like, if there were a Jewish radio station, what would be on that Jewish radio station? And I would love it if somebody would like write me and tell me what they think would be on that Jewish radio station. Because what I say is every single Jewish holiday, everyone is you tried to kill us, we're still here, let's eat. That's everyone. So I'm curious what would be on that radio show.
And maybe that's our next episode, and you and I can do a tag team on that
Ooh.
show.
Ooh, I love that story of why you got to nonprofit. And I agree. Like we really do. Like that's what we do. We change people's lives and we don't even know it. So how did you decide where to go from there? So you like, you're driving home, you hear the story. Okay, now what?
So the next day it was really getting up and saying, so now how do I do this, right? Like, what does it look like? I was fresh out of college, so naive enough to say I only will work somewhere where I'm impacting souls. There's got to be a ministry piece to it. And thank God that that happened, because whenever I considered where I should be, the question I always asked is, what's the ministry in this?
Hmm.
How am I helping someone? What am I doing to move someone forward? And over the last 25, 30 years, what's happened is that it's gotten to a point where I just know my purpose, right? So, in trying then to figure out where I was going to work, I was working at Resurrection Cemetery in San Gabriel in the office. But because I was in the seminary, sometimes I would help doing the graveside services for families when they didn't have a priest or a minister or a deacon or something like that to do that. And then we were helping families mourn. And in that lonely, broken time, bringing some peace, it just felt right. And then from there, I actually got into teaching and I went and worked at St. Gertrude's Catholic School in Bell Gardens. And so I was teaching junior high and really enjoyed that time. My mother would always tease me whenever I went home and complained about something that happened with a student. She would remind me what kind of a student I was and say, while God is not vengeful, man, God sure did remind me of the shit I used to do.
Well, there it is. There it is. There's the first swear word. I knew it was gonna come. I knew it was gonna come.
But then from there, I got into higher ed. I actually went and started working at University of Laverne. I was a director of corporate and foundation relations. And that was important to me because I'm a first gen everything. And so I had to take myself to college, right? I didn't get dropped off. There was no move in experience with my family. My father didn't finish the first grade. I think my mom went up to the fifth or sixth grade. So I had to figure a lot of that out myself. And so that process, I never forgot of how lonely it was and how confusing it was. So I wanted to get into higher ed to help create opportunity for others.
It's so interesting. So your father didn't complete first grade, your mom not fifth grade. So uh, as you were growing up, did they expect that you would go to college? Like, was that something that they wanted you to do?
My parents' American dream was very simple. I'm the youngest of three boys. My parents wanted us to have access to education. They didn't know what it meant. They wanted us to have jobs with medical insurance,
Hmm.
because at times we didn't have medical insurance growing up. And then the third, they wanted us to be homeowners. So I think we can agree that American dream knows no color, gender, race, ethnicity, orientation, right? That's what we all want for ourselves and for people we love. So my parents always said, my dad especially, estudia para que no tengas que trabajar como yo trabajo. Study so that you don't have to work the way I do. He said, I want you to work with your mind and your brain and not with your hands and your feet the way I do. And so that was a value then that was instilled. I was very fortunate that I actually love to read. I love learning. I can't stand homework. I think it's a bunch of bullshit. We put 3, 4, 5, 7 hours worth of homework. It takes the joy out of learning, right? I was like just a C average student, in part because it just felt like I was going through it. I knew what I needed to do to not get kicked out. And then something lit a fire in the senior year. And that's when I really kind of applied myself. And I think it was because my dad also said, look, you either go to college or you go to work. You're not just going to sit here.
That's so interesting. I also was a terrible student and somehow like did enough work just to get by. But I'm curious how you think now, because I don't think you need a college degree to do the job. Like, I don't think you absolutely need to go to college to be able to become an executive director of a nonprofit, right? What do you think?
I agree, actually. I want somebody with heart, with passion, and with conviction. I want someone that wants to serve under-resourced families, individuals, and communities with dignity and respect. Individuals that are experiencing economic poverty, they know they are poor. We should not remind them by how we treat them, the manner in which we address them, the convoluted bureaucracy that we create to access services and shit like that, right? If you're hungry, starving, and I have what you need, food, right? And I dangle it in front of you like a carrot, and then I yank it back and say, now prove to me that you're a citizen. Prove to me that you applied to 3 jobs this week. Whatever BS we put in there, that's, in my opinion, immoral and unethical. My job is to serve you. It's not to judge you. That's it. That's someone else's job, man. My job is to serve. And so when we look at service, then that means that I accept you for who you are, what you are, and why you're here. Eventually, would I like to see you maybe make different decisions? Absolutely. But if you're hungry, we know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? If you don't have your basic needs met, you cannot hear me. You cannot hear me if you are under-resourced in instability. You have to experience stability in order to be advised and guided.
So let me ask you a question. As president and CEO of your nonprofit, and we're going to get into that in a bit, but you don't really get to interact with clients, right? Like when you're in charge, you're in an office, a big office with a lot of booze in it, and like your job is to grow and to bring in donors and deal with the board, all the things that are great and they're executive, but they're not with the clients. And I hear your passion. I mean, I hear your passion so much. How do you feed your soul when you're leading this organization, but you're not actually doing the work?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First of all, other than booze, I do also have artwork in my office. I just want to make that very clear. I'm a collector of Chicano Mexican art. All right, so let's add that with the booze part there. But I appreciate the question, actually, Matt. One of the things that I've done, and this actually happened way back when I was working at Chaffey College. I was executive director of their foundation, and what you described was exactly it. I was in a lot of meetings. I wasn't interacting with students, and I was frustrated one day and stuff, and I just knew I had to get out and walk. And as I was walking and interacting with students, I told myself I have to make sure that I don't lose that connection. So what I've done here then at MAOF is if we have a community event, I do my best to be there, whether it's in the evening or on the weekend, and I'm able to talk with families. We do a food bank here every Thursday. We're feeding 400 to 450 families. I haven't done it as much as I've wanted to, but I've walked that line a few times to talk to the families that are in line to find out why they're there and things like that, you know? So for me, the way I feed my soul and I'm reminded of my purpose and why we do what we do, which also informs my decision making then and processing, is that as much as possible, I'm trying to visit sites. and visit then the programming that we do. And that's hard because we got like 60 sites across the state, right? But I'm also interacting then with also our team members that are serving families. And that helps me, it reminds me of our purpose. And this is how I feed my soul as well.
Cool. I will add to that you do have some phenomenal art in your office. It's true, not just booze. I know, I know. I don't want people out there to get mad at me or Cid for talking about booze as much as I do. So we have a lot of questions from the audience, and I asked for questions not only just around the topic of today's show, but also about you. And I got a question from a guy named Ross in Santa Fe. And Ross said, "Hey Cid, I've been watching you on LinkedIn and I'm looking at your accomplishments and I'm looking at Mexican American Opportunity Foundation and I'm so impressed by what you're doing. I'm an executive director of a small nonprofit here in Santa Fe, and I don't really know if I'm making a huge impact. I'm not sure if I'm doing a good job or if my nonprofit is actually meeting the needs of the community. How do you know when you're doing what you need to be doing?"
So first of all, Santa Fe, New Mexico, great place. They got great art there as well and tremendous food. Ross, for me, it's kind of what I've developed over the years. There's three quotes that I try and live my life by now that for me also put me in the mindset of, of fulfilling my purpose and impacting souls. So the first one is access without support is not opportunity. Access without support is not opportunity. It's not enough for us to have all these wonderful programs that we know could positively impact someone's life if they are not being accessed, and or if we make the process easier for us as staff and team members than it is for the intended user, then we are not creating opportunity. So the way I know then that what I'm doing and what we're doing is effective is, are we providing not only access, but the support to actually access the resource that we offer, right? And so that's why when somebody says, pull yourself up from your bootstraps, that's bullshit, right? There's a lot of assumptions behind that statement. It assumes I have boots. It assumes my boots have straps. It assumes that I know what the hell the straps are for, right? And so I have read and listened and heard a lot of these quote unquote rags to riches stories. I have yet to truly hear one or read one where they did it 100% by themselves. There's always been someone. And maybe it was a negative piece where they called you a loser and that motivated you to turn it around, right? There was still someone that had an impact and an influence in you. So for me then, ensuring that we create the support system in addition to the access creates the opportunity. And I like creating opportunity for under-resourced people, right? So that's one. Second one is, and it's somebody from the name Rita Pearson, who is an educator. She's got a phenomenal TED Talk. I encourage you to go and see it. It's called Every Child Deserves a Champion. And she says, every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. And the reality is that we need that as adults as well. So I look at who is being a champion for someone that has lost their voice or has yet to unleash their voice, because the voice is there, right? I'm wondering who's advocating for and things like that. So if I'm being a champion for someone that otherwise wouldn't be able to access a support system and thereby create opportunity for themselves, right? So if I'm doing that, then I know that I'm fulfilling my purpose and I'm feeding, like you said earlier, right? I'm feeding my soul as well. And we're helping someone. And then the last one is, I will not remain silent so that you can remain comfortable. I will not remain silent so that you can remain comfortable. I would say that as you progress in your career and as you are able to earn and achieve these places of authority and influence and power, because there's nothing wrong with that, right? How are you using it to help other people? And I've just made a decision that for myself, I need to be a voice. And so, we hear a lot about white privilege, right? And we hear a lot about privilege. I had a mentor tell me, you got to do a privilege check every now and then as well. And I do that. And so I ask myself, what is my privilege? I'm a light-skinned Mexican. That's privilege. I'm a light-skinned, educated Mexican. That's privilege. I'm a light-skinned, educated Mexican with a doctorate degree. That's privilege. I'm a light-skinned, educated Mexican with a doctorate degree with a pretty decent command of the English language. And so I'm not afraid to speak up anymore. I'm not afraid to speak out. I'm not afraid to speak in front of a group because it's true, right? With this, with all the fun stuff, there is a responsibility. When I've lived my life to those three quotes and have manifested that, I know then that I'm having a positive impact. I'm impacting souls. I'm living my purpose and I'm helping others. That's how I know that I'm doing the right thing.
I just want to tell you that 4 years of waiting to interview you, not enough. Like, now that's really amazing. I've always hated that dumb quote about pulling yourself up from your boot with your bootstraps. The dumbest quote in the world. So I appreciate that, and I hope that it helps Ross, because I know what it's like to run a nonprofit where like you're not sure if you're making an impact. You don't know if you're doing it. And I think it's easy to get disillusioned as well. And so I appreciate that. And I also really appreciated his question. Also, obviously, there's somebody out there who's doing their research on you, Cid. So why did you decide you wanted to be a CEO of a nonprofit? Like, why not stay in programming? Why not like be front lines? Why the CEO piece?
There's a good friend of mine who I used to work with at Chaffey College, and there was an opportunity to take on some additional duties, responsibilities, and advance my career. And I remember thinking about not going for it. And when she asked me why, I said to her, I don't want to lose that connection with students because it feeds me. And she said, how many students is the foundation impacting? Are you impacting? And I don't remember what the number was, but I said what it was, right? And she said, okay, but if you open your mind up to the possibility of this other position, how many more will you be able to help? And I really had to discern that and process that and what that meant. And then I had to confront my fears. What if I fail? Can I really do this? And so processing all of that, I thought, shit, what's the worst thing? I've been hungry. Again, I'm young and naive enough to think that I can bounce back. I wish we didn't lose that type of a mindset. I wish we never got so scared that we boxed ourselves up as much as we do. And so over the years, I've just developed this audacity and arrogance of confidence to think that, yeah, I can do this. Do I know everything? Absolutely not. But man, thank God for Google and YouTube and ChatGPT and all these other things. Joking aside, though, for me, it's that acceptance that I can try and I can do my best and I can do this. And so I don't want us afraid of accepting a higher position with more responsibility, especially if you have those gifts that open those doors of opportunity for others. That is where that kind of obligation piece comes in for me. And again, I make a mistake every single day. I do my best to learn from it and not do it again. Thank God for patience and grace, right? But for me, it's like, well, why the hell not? Because I sure as hell have seen people do it a shittier way.
Oh, trust me, I've seen so many terrible CEOs out there, so many terrible executive directors out there. Wait, okay, so you said the audacity and ambition to succeed?
Audacity and the arrogance of confidence.
The audacity and the arrogance of confidence. First of all, that's what we're going to title this show. And I just think that really is a great quote to live by, because you need both. You absolutely need both. There's no question about it. And it's, by the way, totally okay to have that arrogance. Like, you're doing a good job. It sucks to be a CEO of a nonprofit. You should know it. And you know it. So I appreciate that.
And I want to say something else because the other thing is, like, for us, there's a cultural piece to this as well. And so my parents raised us and they would always say, no seas presumido, right? Don't brag, right? Don't be arrogant and things like that. But I got to tell you that that's part of that colonizer mentality, though, of how we control other people. And what I mean by that is that I have seen other people speak with confidence about their accomplishments, right? And no one questions it. They're lauded, applauded, and congratulated, right? And then I have seen people from underrepresented groups, minorities, people of color, and especially, God forbid, they have an accent, right? But I have seen people of color talk about what they've been able to do, and they're the ones that are called arrogant, cocky, and all that other shit. And that's how we keep people down. And that's why that piece, that quote about I will not remain silent so you can remain comfortable is extremely important to me. We have to push ourselves. And the other piece is that I've had tremendous mentors in my life that have seen where I belonged and where I should be before I did. They saw something in me that I had yet to see in myself. That's the other piece that is extremely important, right? About how we get to these types of positions and seats and chairs, is that there's always been someone pushing and telling me that I belong there. And that helps to build then that confidence that I do.
Are you mentoring anybody right now?
Yes.
You are. Okay, good. I was gonna say, because I guarantee you there are like lines of people who'd want to be mentored by you. So do you want to, I don't know, on the show, publicly thank one of your mentors that was a big part of your life?
Oh my gosh. For my doctorate, I had started a master's program and I was in a class and the professor asked me to stay after class. And I thought I was in trouble, because when you've experienced trauma, whenever a person in authority asks you to stay behind, you think you're in trouble, right? That's the important part of the healing work that we get to do. And so I stayed behind and she said, what are you doing here? And so I was like, well, gosh, I'm like participating. I did this. Did I say something wrong? Right away, I got defensive. And then she says, no, no, no. Like, why are you taking this class? And she says, you don't belong here. And again, I was like, oh shit, what did I do? And I said, well, because I want to get a doctorate and I need my master's in order to get a doctorate. And she says, you already know all this stuff. You're good. Long story short, she made some calls. The next day, I'm talking to someone in the doctoral program. 1 or 2 weeks later, I'm enrolled in a doctoral program. I skipped the master's program, Matt. And that's because Dr. Peggy Redmond saw something in me that I had yet to see in myself, that I was ready for that next step. And very important for people that grow up under-resourced in poverty, our career ladder does not follow this normal ascension on these rungs of ladders. We zigzag because when you're under-resourced, that's how you get through life as well. You zigzag through life. And I thank God she had that foresight, right? That's how we build people up, man.
I love that. And actually, what I think is really interesting as a leader, if you ask somebody to stick around or come into your office, of course, it could absolutely be that they think they're in trouble, even if we're trying to give them a raise or whatever it is. I talked about this on another show, and I'm curious what you would say. I hate it when I'm interviewing people and I ask them about their management style and they say, I have an open door policy. Anybody can come to me at any time, right? And I think that that's extraordinarily elitist. I don't think people are just going to walk into your office. I don't think that that's something that everybody's comfortable doing. You got to go to them. What would you say? Like, how would you answer that question?
It goes back to access and support, right? So as the CEO, we want to create opportunity for people. So I like it when people come. But what do I do to make it welcoming, right? And so I make sure we always have candy, right? Because at first that becomes the excuse for coming in. And it leads to the reason as to why they come in. Because there's a difference between excuses and reasons. And then what I found is that I started inviting with purpose. It's my job, right, to make sure that I not only provide you with the assistance or the purpose for the meeting, but you have to walk away knowing that you are welcome to come back. And part of the reason that I have the artwork up is that people want to come and see the artwork. That becomes the excuse. And then the authentic connection leads to the reason as to why they come back. I hope that answered it.
No, I love that. I think that's awesome. I really, really do. And by the way, it's true. Your office is ridiculously welcoming, like overly welcoming. So let's talk growth. I think, part of this show is I really wanted to talk about growth and I really wanted to talk about doing more as a nonprofit and if you should. So I want everybody to know something, Cid, that I'm so impressed by you. I was at a board retreat with you and you were talking about the future of MAOF and you talked about it becoming $1 billion agency. $1 billion. I don't know any nonprofits that big. And that's spectacular. So I have a few questions about growth from the audience, but first, what I want to ask you is how in the world are you going to grow this thing to $1 billion? Like, that's crazy. What are you doing?
Yeah. I love to dream, Matt. The person without dreams has no hope. Person without hope has no life. And so I refuse to settle for mediocrity, right? And so I looked at our organization, MAOF, been around for 60 years, founded by civil rights leader Dionisio Morales, who just had this innate, profound understanding that the lack of access for resources for Mexican Americans, and he knew he had to do something. What we do, I know for a fact, is an answer to someone's prayer. The services we provide, someone has found themselves in such need that they have said a prayer to whomever it is that they believe in, and they surrender to and said, please help. And then all of a sudden we come along. So when I look at what we do, and I, through experience and through reading and research, look at how many under-resourced families there are in the state of California alone, right? I know that we have to become a billion-dollar operation. One, it expands the services that we're providing. Our model is unique in this continuum of care, empowering families from childhood to senior. The other piece to that, though, is that as a minority-ran organization, we have to become these billion-dollar operations because we know our families best. And what happens when large organizations, large corporations, they want to cookie cutter everything. So it worked over here. They all must be the same, right? And so those people, triggers for me, those people just need this. And if they would just do as we told them, right? There's a lot of judgment behind those statements. And again,
Right.
my job isn't to judge you. My job is to serve you. If we serve under-resourced families through our model and uplift them, we have to become then this billion-dollar operation. What that also does is that it makes us seen as an entirely different level of players. Because now we're at the table advising, guiding, and informing decision makers that impact our lives. Policy, business, the major sectors, healthcare, education, housing, policing, and everything. Because you have to be at that level in order to be recognized as the influencer. Could we do it at $500 million, at 500 million? Probably. But that's not enough.
Okay. I have a question from a guy named Frank, and Frank sits on a board. So he says, I'm a new board member and I keep asking, why don't we need to grow? Our executive director keeps talking about growth, but I don't think we do. I think we need to serve our clients better. So how do I know when is the right time to grow and when is the right time to just look at what we're doing and try to do better?
Yeah. So for me, it's not only being able to say, gosh, I'm part of a billion-dollar operation, right? I know how critical data is. And so the first position I created when I got here was a chief learning data and evaluation officer. Because we do a really good job of collecting the quantitative data. How many, how often, where, all of the number stuff, right? But the reality is that if I can't put a face, a name, and a story to that data, then it's easy to be dismissive about it. So for me, what was extremely important is how effective are we in delivering the services? So right now we serve between, let's say, 100 and 125,000 annually through all of our programs and services. It doesn't mean that we're going to multiply that times 6, and that's how many families we're going to serve. It could mean that we're going to provide more resources and more support systems and more programming, that number might double. It's not only the quantity, it's also the quality. So Frank, what I would say is, how do you know that you are living your mission? What stories are there behind that? So when I say that we provide immigration services, I want names. I want stories. When we talk about the impact that Head Start has on families, I want a name and I want a story. That's also then back to an earlier question of why it's important to me to go and visit and go and talk, because I'm hearing the story as well. It feeds me, it inspires me, it motivates me, but it also gives me the speaking points when I'm meeting with funders, elected officials, or even trying to, share the stories with the board. How do you know you're having impact? You've got to be able to qualify and quantify it.
So you mentioned the board, and I think that was really, it's a great segue. So $1 billion is, again, insane, and I know you can do it. How do you bring your board along with you on this journey, right? How do you get them excited? And I'm asking you this question because I was at a board meeting. There was a retiring executive director, and I was at the board meeting when she was introducing us to the board to do the search to replace her. And they had just gotten a gift, just like that day. It was $1 million bequest that opened up the letter. There it was. And she told her board, and her board was like, yeah, cool, thanks. Like they weren't excited. And I was sitting there like, are you kidding me? Like I even said, like, that's huge, guys. Like, not one of you is writing a check for $1 million, right? So I think boards are complicated. Boards are difficult. Boards are challenging. Boards can also be helpful. How do you get your board around your vision to grow this thing to $1 billion?
I learned a long time ago, Matt, that I needed to be able to communicate not only the way I want to communicate, but I had to keep my listener in mind, right? So I call it the being multilingual, the leadership communication. So getting to know your board. And so I'll use you and Allison as examples. If you're both at the board table, I need to know what motivates you and what demotivates you, right? And I need to know that as well for Allison. And then when I'm pitching, I have to be able to touch on all of those things. I think the other piece is that it's the reinforcement of our vision and mission, our purpose. Because if we agree that that's our purpose, if we agree that that's what we should be doing, and it connects to that, then that helps for the justification for it. And boards have fiduciary responsibility. I get it. I sit on boards larger and smaller than MAOF as well. So I understand what we should be looking at and looking for. But for me, it always will come back to those 3 quotes. Are we creating access with support to create opportunity? Are we being champions for who and what we say we're supposed to be doing? And then I won't remain silent. And so if I can remember that when I'm pitching, what do you need to hear to get on board? What motivates you? What demotivates you? How do I incorporate that into my narrative? What data am I bringing behind it? What story am I telling? What proof of concept do I have? All of those things have to be happening in your brain simultaneously. And when it comes out, it's just got to flow like a conversation. That's the beauty of communication.
I think that's really important. And okay, so I got a question from my favorite name, Matt in Philadelphia. I'm on this board, and as much as I want to grow, they are so risk averse. They refuse to do anything different than what they're doing. There's such a huge need in our community, and they absolutely refuse to take a chance. Is it time for me to quit? Should I keep fighting? I'm banging my head against the wall. What do I do?
Wow, Matt, talk about a heavy question, man. I can think about boards that I've been on where sometimes I've had to step off because there was a disconnect, right? Or that there was an alignment, I, again, have to look back at my purpose. Why am I at the table? What can I contribute? And is it needed? And it's okay if it's not needed. There are plenty of organizations that need committed, dedicated board members that are willing to work the way the organization needs them to work, right? And so for me, I think that I would ask myself, what's our vision? What's our mission? What do we do? And is there a connection to that? So if we say our vision and mission is to do 1, 2, 3, right? Feed stray dogs, but we're not feeding any stray dogs. All we're doing is feeding stray pigeons that have been injured. Are we living our mission and vision? And if we're not, then I would bring that up in all honesty. And if there's still the pushback, that's not the best, highest, and most effective use of my energy, of my time, of my emotion. It's okay to walk away.
Energy, time, and emotion. Cid, I'm telling you, you've got some really phenomenal quotes here. I want to get back to Matt for 1 second. I will in a minute, but I can't remember what I did yesterday. How do you remember all these quotes? I feel so stupid. How do you remember everything?
So in the seminary, we take a class, it's called homiletics. It's how to give a sermon.
Uh-huh.
And Father Calixto Lopez, I remember him saying that the best homily, the best sermon, the best speech you will ever give is the one you need to hear yourself. And so thank you for the compliment, but it's that I have to be reminded about what's the best, highest, and most effective use of my time, of my energy, and my emotion, right?
I literally can't remember what I did yesterday. So what I would say to Matt is, I was on a board and I was the square peg and everything I wanted just wouldn't get done. And it was so frustrating that I realized I didn't fit into the culture of the organization. And that was okay. And so I left and found myself another board where I did fit in. And that was a hard lesson for me. But just like you said, it's not worth it. It's not worth the energy. If you don't fit in and you want to make all these changes and they're not interested, that's okay. You don't have to be there.
Another seminary story, my pastor, Monsignor Joe Greeley, I remember one time we were talking about volunteers, and he said, we have every right to ask a volunteer to give until it hurts, but we have no right to ask them to give until they bleed. In church, we talk about sacrificial giving in religion. And so making a sacrifice in order to give to help someone and things like that, putting others before yourself, okay? But if we're asking them to bleed and injuring them in the process, then we're the hypocrites. Because now they become part of the group that needs to be fed and helped and all that other kind of stuff. The reason I say that in response to what you're saying is I don't have a problem sacrificing for boards that I sit on, right? If it's hurting me, if it's taking my time away for the wrong reasons, if it's hurting me emotionally, negatively impacting me and stuff like that, I also have to walk away for my own good. But that's a hard decision to make.
Yeah, really hard, especially when you believe in the mission. It's so hard as a board member to walk away, but that's okay. Again, there are lots and lots and lots and lots of great organizations out there.
Matt, this seems like the perfect opportunity for you to tell our listener about board builders. Take it away.
So every single CEO or board member comes to us and says, hey, how do we find new board members? How do we get board members to fundraise? How do we work together as a team? What if we have a bully on our board? We don't really love our executive director. How do we deal with this? We don't love our board chair. How do we deal with this? So Board Builders is all of it. It is a coaching program. It's a monthly subscription, and it's also quarterly happy hour events to find you new board members. It is such a cool program. I'm so proud of it. So for any of you out there who are interested in learning more about Board Builders, who have questions about their board, who want to bring on new board members, who don't quite know, how to run a board meeting or how to be interesting or how to fundraise or just want some coaching, please check us out. Go to our website at envisionnonprofit.com.
And now back to the show.
So, as president and CEO, or any previous leadership position that you've had in a nonprofit, there are so many things that I dislike about being in charge. What is one thing about being a CEO of a nonprofit that you don't enjoy?
I've gotten in trouble for saying this, right? But what the hell? I'll blame it on the drinking, okay? I believe nonprofits exist because government chooses or refuses to do their job. And the way they absolve themselves from it is that they fund nonprofits through grants, contracts, whatever the hell it is. And they wash their hands by funding nonprofits, obfuscating their responsibility and putting it on to someone else. And then they regulate the shit out of us. So you have to provide these 25 services, but none of the funds can go to services. None of the funds can go to people. So you got to go find it some way. They talk about the importance of a livable wage, and they cap how much they're willing to contribute to that. We underfund salaries and benefits because people do this for the heart. Bullshit. And so that is extremely frustrating to me, then, that we don't fund not properly. They couldn't do it, and sometimes they say it's because we're not the experts. And then they question our expert, and then they limit how we can use the funding and force us to go and find the money from somewhere else. I think it is immoral and unethical to provide one-time funding for ongoing needs. And they tell you it's your responsibility then to institutionalize it. Well, fuck, if I had the money before, I wouldn't be coming to you for it. And then they make these contracts where you have to spend it and invoice it before you can get paid, right? And so, look, MAOF, we're fortunate. We're blessed with our size. We can accept those types of arrangements. But other organizations that are providing phenomenal, much needed services, they don't have the capital to do that. And then try and get the government to pay net 20, net 30. They don't do it. But if I'm late with the report one day, sometimes they're on my ass and they're threatening to not send the money. The hypocrisy of that is extremely frustrating, because always in the back of my mind is not only the 100,000 people we're serving and what they need from us. I am thinking about our 922 team members and their families. I never want to be the reason why they find themselves in financial trouble, unable to pay because of something that I didn't do and we didn't do. We lose funding in a contract and I have to lay someone off. I don't want that on my contract.
I can tell you're not at all passionate about anything to do with government funding at all. Yeah, right. Thanks. I ended the show making you mad. I actually don't think that that's going to get you in trouble. I think most nonprofits are really frustrated by the way government funds us. And I think this is a whole other show, because I don't believe that people out there, the majority of people out there, understand how nonprofits get funded. And I think, can you do me a favor? Like maybe max 30 seconds. Can you explain to the listeners out there who didn't understand anything you just said, how nonprofits get funded by government contracts?
So it's basically a contract for services. So we get a contract to provide a service, and then some of them will front the money. And so then we've got to have a budget. We got to be planned, everything, how it's going to spend. It's got to be approved. Or I have to front the money to pay for everything in that budget. And then I have to send an invoice to the government and then wait for that money to come in. But ultimately, it's a contract for services. There's a service that's needed. We are able to provide that service. You are hiring me to provide the service.
So people should know this is all taxpayer dollars that fund all kinds of different programs: mental health, domestic violence, homelessness, substance abuse, Head Start, education, preschool, all that good stuff. So that's government contracts. And as somebody who's dealt with them, they are beyond frustrating. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. I think people need to understand that, and they don't understand that. So I want you, please, to tell everybody a little bit about MAOF, since our listeners may not know what you do or the organization that you work at. So please tell our listeners about the Mexican American Opportunity Foundation.
So for over 60 years, MAOF has been uplifting families and really just meeting them where they are and what they need. And so what I mean by that is we have pillars of service. One of our pillars is childcare and education. We operate childcare centers. We help individuals get licensed to be childcare providers, and then we're able to contract them. We provide Head Start, early Head Start, preschool services, and then a bunch of supportive services behind that. The second pillar is community development, and there we're providing immigration services, tax services, digital literacy, financial coaching. We have funding to do some loans, so lending circles, which is basically what in Spanish we call them cundinas. It's a legal cundina. It's basically 10 people come together, and let's say it's $1,000. And so for 10 months, everybody's getting $1,000, and then there's programming that happens behind that. And then we're part of some research initiatives related to Hispanic health. And that's extremely important because we're gathering data on how we make decisions connected to health so that we can better inform, again, electeds and insurance companies and medical organizations on our behavior so they stop cookie cutting. Okay. And then the other one is senior services. So we provide case management, benefits enrollment, translation, transportation services, food services. We operate some congregate dining centers. Seniors can come and get a healthy hot meal, and then we activate the space. So there's programming, workshops, seminars, and things like that. We do Zumba for seniors, which is the best thing in the world to warm your heart. Matt, you already know me. I'm going to tell a story. And so I was coming in to our headquarters here, and I heard all this music from the outside. I'm thinking, what the hell, man? Like, people got to work, Some people need quiet space to work. And I walk in, and in our large conference room, the music is coming from there, and I'm going to tell them to turn it down. And I walk in, and I see these seniors doing Zumba, and it just was that reminder to get over myself. And then and the other pillar is partnerships. We look at how we create partnerships, again, to bring those essential resources that families need, and looking at then how we can be a conduit to that. And so that's what we do. We have about 920 employees right now, team members. Right now, we're looking at an operating budget of about 270 million, somewhere in there. And then we're in 9 counties now across California. We've expanded into some new counties.
Crazy. I mean, it's insane the things that it took you like 3 minutes just to say a few things about what you do. It's just crazy to me how big the organization is, how much you do. The Zumba thing makes me laugh because one of my favorite things to do is go on cruises, and old people love Zumba. I don't know why, but they love Zumba. So it just cracks me up to no end. Well, we've gotten to the end of our show, and I'm curious, Sid, if there's anything else that you want to tell anybody out there who's listening about your story, about being in charge, about growth, about nonprofit-y stuff, anything that you want to share that I didn't ask you.
Yeah. I want to encourage people to just dream and dream out loud. As a first gen, I have learned that I am the manifestation of my parents' wildest dreams. They and their ancestors hoped and they prayed that we would become something. And even amidst all my fuck ups and my mistakes and trips and falls, right? We are still doing what they wanted us to do and even more. And there's still room to do more. And so when we look at under-resourced communities, they are very often living in what we call the tyranny of today. They're in survival mode. Future planning and future thinking is the end of the day, the end of the week, or payday, or whenever it is that they're getting the relief that they need. We have to remember that our job isn't to judge them, our job is to serve them. Only way to serve them is to establish a connection and a relationship. That's what I remind myself of every day. And then my prayer again is just use me to impact a soul, and I don't need to know.
Well, thank you for making me feel like shit about myself. I so appreciate you. I so respect you. MAOF is lucky to have you, and you are lucky to have them. And I cannot wait to continue to watch all the things you do there when you become a billion-dollar organization. And then maybe we'll make both our moms proud, because Jewish guilt, I don't know what's worse, Jewish guilt or Catholic guilt. I'm not sure which one's worse, but I think we'll just go out there and we'll just preach to the world.
I love the blessings that I have and what we get to do. It's extremely rewarding, it's extremely important, but it's also how we build this confidence that we can do and change the world.
I agree. Well, on that note, let's go change the world. And thank you so much, Sid. I so appreciate you.
Appreciate you, brother.
Hey, Ashley.
Hey, Matt.
So, what'd you think of my friend Sid?
I had to get a pen and paper during this episode to write down all of those inspiring quotes that he lives by. I freaking love it.
You know, it's crazy. And I think I even told him this on the show. Like, I can't remember what I did this morning. Like, my memory is shot, but all those quotes, all the things that he said, there were no notes. He wasn't reading from anything. He just knows all that. That's insanity to me.
And it's not just that he has this amazing memory and can recant these quotes, it's that he truly uses them. Remember in the 90s when you could get those like inspirational posters for your office and they would have like some beautiful mountain scene and then they would say something inspiring. They were like motivational posters or whatever. But how many of us then went and actually lived by the quotes that we saw? And Sid clearly is putting into practice this inspiration.
What I'm going to respond to that, by the way, is I was too young in the 90s to even read. However, Ashley, that's how I felt about Sid. I want to be a better human. He just makes me want to be a better person, which we both know, Ashley, is never going to happen, right?
We do. We both know it. I found Sid himself to be an inspiration.
Yeah. And I'm so happy that our listener gets to listen to Sid, know his story, hopefully learn from him, and get to know the organization. MAOF is going to be $1 billion nonprofit. That is no joke. And it's all really due to him and his efforts.
And you believe when he says, I'm putting this out in the world, that this is going to become $1 billion organization, you believe that he can make that happen. I need to really put it on my vision board that our podcast can become a multi-million-dollar entity because, you know, Travis Kelce, player for the Kansas City Chiefs, he and his brother just sold their podcast New Heights for $100 million. So I'm just thinking if two dudes who play football can do that, well, why not our podcast featuring nonprofit leaders? Why not, Matt?
Of course we should. And if I'm correct, I'm just going to ask you a question. Didn't Travis party too much with his girlfriend so that he actually isn't playing very well right now? Did I hear that correctly? Am I making that up?
You know, if you're going to go there, I will just throw out this in his defense. I care less about how he plays in September than I do and how he plays in January. So I'm going to leave it at that.
That's fair. All right, Ashley, anything we want to leave with our listener before we let them go?
We just want to thank everyone for tuning into this show. Please continue to subscribe, like us, tell your friends, find us on Instagram, and share your questions with us. Matt is always looking for questions and comments from our listeners out there. Anything you want to know about the nonprofit industry.